Welcome to SoulShift, where modern science, ancient wisdom, and real life align to help you create a more joyful, balanced, and fulfilling life. I'm Mindy Gorman-Plutzer, and I'm here with my amazing and beautiful co-hosts, Allie Anderson and Christine Morgenstern-Shin. Today, we're talking about something that every single one of us will face at some point in our lives: setbacks, problems, moments when everything feels like it's falling apart. But what if those moments weren't endings? What if they were actually invitations? What if the very thing that feels like it's breaking you could become the catalyst for your greatest transformation? Our guest today has not only lived this reality, but she's created a methodology that helps leaders turn real-world problems into strategic momentum. Dr. Diane Dye is an experimentation strategist and CEO advisor who has worked with more than 500 CEOs and founders navigating growth, culture, and complexity. With a doctorate in organizational change and leadership and a master's in communication management from the University of Southern California, she's the founder of People Risk Consulting, where she teaches leaders to eliminate the risks that stall transformation and uncover opportunities hidden inside setbacks. Diane is the author of the workbook, Creating Critical Opportunity, and creator of the CEO Innovation Masterclass and cohort, known for delivering rapid breakthroughs and measurable results. She's recognized for creating psychological safety frameworks that improve performance in high-pressure environments. And she's known as the experimentation strategist executives bring in when the stakes are high and clarity is non-negotiable. And what we here at SoulShift love about Diane's work is that it's born from her own critical opportunity moment, a setback that could have derailed everything, but instead became the birthplace of a revolutionary method for turning crisis into clarity. Welcome to SoulShift, where modern science, ancient wisdom, and real life align.
SoulShift offers a peaceful pause in your week, a gentle reminder that meaningful change doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Together, we'll discover practical tools, we'll share authentic conversations, and honor the beautiful complexity of being human.
This is your invitation to breathe, to reflect, and to trust the process.
Thank you for being here. Let's shift
Gently.
Together. Dr. Diane Dye, welcome to SoulShift. We are so honored to have you here.
Hello, ladies. It's so great to be here. I'm honored to be on the show today.
So, let's start with your story. I want to start here because I think it's so important for people to understand that this method, this process, didn't just come from theory. It came from lived experience. You had your own critical opportunity moment when you were laid off during your first 4 months of your master's program. So, can you take us back to that time?
Oh, absolutely. I was working with an early stage startup, and I was in a leadership role there with an equity position, and things were rolling along quite well. I had automated a lot of their customer success function, enabled their sales team. Things were just riding, and I was riding high because I had just been accepted to the University of Southern California, which was my dream school at the time. So everything was turning up roses for me back then until it wasn't. And what happened was I got a call into the CFO's office, and it went something like this: "Great job, Diane. You automated everything needed for the customer success function and the marketing function. Now all we have to do is, now that sales enablement is done, we just need to amp up the sales department and we are good to go. Unfortunately, we need the budget from your role to do that. You're laid off." So, of course, my jaw hit the floor because I was laid off 4 months into a program, a master's in communication management program at my dream school. And I was beside myself, but fortunately, I also had an amazing cohort there. And the one thing the University of Southern California really does, if any of your listeners are familiar with the Trojan family, are members of the Trojan family, it really is a place of non-judgmental support where you can go in with your ugly and you can come out a superstar. And so I went straight to my professor and I'm like, what in the world do I do? Like, I just started this because I called unemployment immediately, as we all do. And unemployment said, great, you're just going to have to go ahead, since you're so early in your program, you're just going to have to go ahead and postpone or quit that master's program so you're available to accept any and all full-time work. And then you can claim unemployment. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned by that and turned upside down. So I went to my professor. I said, what do I do? And she said, have you talked to your group? Have you talked to your cohort? And I'm like, sure, I guess I could go ahead and do that. So I have 4 beautiful people who I am still in contact with today who I sat down with, and they asked me a great question. And all cohorts are different, but this one just asked me the question, like, what do you really, really want? What does your heart want? And I said, what I really want is I've been freelancing since 2009. When the recession hit, I had to turn everything upside down and start freelancing and build things up from scratch when I was laid off then. Fun fact, I've been laid off from 85% of the organizations I've ever worked for because I optimized myself out of roles. Turns out that means I'm a management consultant. I just didn't know that. So I just began to lean into what my heart wanted, and my heart wanted my management consulting firm. And I said, that's what I want. They said, then go do it. The next day, I marched myself down to the Secretary of State's office. I started what at the time was called What Works Consultants. And because I wanted to do what worked for the client, not just for my wallet. And I opened the door and I got a referral and I started business. But without the power of that cohort, with those people who were walking alongside me during something hard, I would have gone to other people in my life, people who maybe would have co-signed my anguish, who would have said, oh, you poor thing, or doesn't the government suck? They're terrible, or any of a number of things that could have been done that would have driven me into what then become, as a result of me graduating from that master's program, my master's thesis, which was critical opportunity method, which created critical opportunity thinking, the ability to, from a critical moment, that problem, that setback, that crisis, follow a process that drives you into innovation versus setback, eventual failure, and giving up. So I created something I could use on myself and help others.
Diane, this must have been devastating. You're just starting your master's program. You have this huge investment in your future. And suddenly it sounds like the foundation just drops out from below you, right? And I mean, I'm just really impressed that you use it as an opportunity rather than catastrophe, because I think a lot of people would have just walked away and said, that's over, forget it, go back to square one. But you really jumped into an opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that because I grew up poor and scrappy, as I call it, I am very used to hearing the word no. And I believe that it actually isn't the number of times you get to yes that gets you to success. It's the number of times you creatively get past the no. And I had to be super creative when I was, poor and scrappy. So I think that it's part of that environment and, driving forward and getting what I want when I didn't have much, that laid the groundwork for that. But it really was that cohort that was the catalyst for remembering who I was.
I'm curious about, because now, and I don't know how many years it's been, please share, of that you've created the critical opportunity method. Can you go back to that time when you were in the middle of this crisis? And I don't know if this intuitively happened, but you mapped out what now is, your main source of a solution for businesses. Can you walk us through how your personal process aligned with what you now teach as the stages of critical opportunity thinking? Or did that develop after your experience?
It definitely developed as a result of research after my experience, but certainly lived experience of myself and others contributed to this. As part of my master's thesis, I looked at women who were part of the Me Too movement and their experience with great setbacks and how they rebounded through that. So my study was both qualitative and quantitative stories and data and observing companies that failed as well. But I can tell you, and I'm, just rewinding and observing myself, and this was back in 2016 when this occurred, just for timeline. So I was at the point where I was at a time of increased awareness in my life. At the point in time, I was 2 years sober, and I was very plugged in to what was uncomfortable and not drownable with distraction. So knowing that this was uncomfortable and not drownable with distraction, I then kind of went back to that, again, poor and scrappy. And what would I do? I would ask a question because I didn't know. And questions are expansive. And as I learned later on in my education, questions are the hallmark of innovation and expansion. Question marks are very expansive, whereas exclamation points and periods are very, that's it, limiting. So I asked a question, and I asked that question to the right people, on the top of SoulShift and guidance and that. I did feel very just guided to do that through my lived experience and the environment that I had. I had such a great environment at USC that it made it okay to do that. I trusted these people. I knew that they wouldn't judge me. I also knew that they were at my level and they were strivers and achievers as well. So I felt safe. I was scared. I was uncertain. I was crying. I was a mess. And they loved me through all of that. It was okay to be there, and it was safe to be there. And from that place, then the action could evolve from a very important space where I felt held.
Diane, this is fascinating because what you're describing is essentially what we talk about all the time on this show. The pause that happens between stimulus and response, right? And as you said, you ask the questions in order to get the response after the stimulus, right? So it's in that space that transformation becomes possible. But you had to come into awareness, consciousness, and humility when faced with this problem. So could you break down what each of those elements meant in this journey? Why are they the first stage of what you call the upward spiral?
So awareness, consciousness, and humility are the first step after the critical opportunity. It's the critical situation that's realized that results in a critical opportunity or a critical failure. The upward spiral represents the critical opportunity, and awareness, consciousness, and humility are the components of where you need to be with the problem. So what are the differences? Awareness is, I know that there is a problem. Pure and simple, there is awareness that a problem exists, and I'm not going to hide from it. I'm going to recognize that, yes, you exist, and I can do something about it. I have a little bit of power here. And the greatest thing is that you are 100% powerful because you are 100% in control of your thoughts, emotions, your actions, what you do around something. So yay for awareness. Consciousness is now coming into a deeper understanding of that awareness and its environment and the conditions surrounding it. So not only is, this is a problem, unemployment is not going to be available to me because I don't want to quit my master's program. That doesn't lead me to the opportunity just yet. It is the problem consciousness is, okay, so what's the real situation here? I am in a master's program that supports me, and that I'm learning usable things that I can use to further develop my management consulting firm. I have people in here who really support me, really love on me just where I am. I have student loans, and student loans are for housing. They are for food, and they are for education. I am okay. So then humility comes into play. And ego is either too good to do something or not good enough to do something. So if I were to swing into ego at this point, I would be like, well, I'm too good. I'll just go out and get any old job. It'll be fine. I'll get hired like that. Forget about it. Just on with status quo-ville. I'm too good for this mess anyway. Not good enough is I'm not good enough for USC. And this is the universal sign that I am not good enough for USC. I do not belong in this program. The universe is spitting me out, and I'm just not good enough for it. None of those drive innovation. So when you can come into this space of awareness of the problem, the environment the problem exists in, and then within yourself, you are both enough and you are also a human among humans. You can now look at this problem from a different standpoint, and you can do what I call putting on a different hat. So what putting on a different hat is, it's the ability to look at a problem from a perspective other than your own. So you can call yourself a researcher, a curious kid, an explorer, an adventurer, anything you want to call yourself that you've always wanted to be when you wanted to grow up. And you can look at it in research methodology is called a theoretical framework. You can put on that hat and go, okay, I'm this. And now I'm going to separate and look through everything through that lens. So what would a reporter ask? How would a reporter come at this? And when you separate yourself just slightly, ever so slightly from the problem, you can then observe it and ask those questions. So then you can come into that next stage where you're really looking at your beliefs about the problem. So automatically, that recording in the head is going to start to play, and it's going to say all sorts of things. And I believe that the worst thing that you can do is ignore or try to bypass that recording. There are bodily truths that recording is playing. There are installations from the past that recording is playing that have to be recognized. So you say, maybe this is true because da-da-da-da-da-da, as many as you can list. Then you challenge yourself as that persona, that reporter, maybe this isn't true because, and you go looking for evidence. Maybe this isn't true. Whatever you seek, you will find. Whatever you focus on increases. And you put yourself in these places. And from the things that maybe this is not true, because then you can say, maybe it's possible that, and then you get crazy creative. One of the reasons why I know you, Mindy, is because I was stuck this past year, and I utilized therapy, as I believe all people should. And I went to my therapist. I'm like, give me a worksheet, give me something to work this out. And she's like, you wrote the workbook. Use your own workbook. And that's where I came into our mutual connection together, and the reason why I'm on this podcast. So you start to then formulate from the what is possible. You pick one thing, just one. And I call that one thing that base material for what I call the domino. And the domino is the one thing that if you tip it, everything else just comes down. So for the case of, getting laid off 4 months into my master's program, my domino really was, how do I sustain myself and stay in USC? And then there were possibilities and options, but there were possibilities and options that called a little bit closer to my heart. And that was when my cohort said, start your firm. If that's what you want, go for it. And the experimentations and the actions flow through that. But without that awareness, consciousness, and humility, you go into denial, disavowal, and ego, which is the start of the downward spiral. And that's where you don't want to go.
Diane, I am so grateful for this messaging. I think I'm hearing it from two perspectives. I'm hearing it from, I'm a business owner, right? And I run my own practice, and I'm loving this awareness, consciousness, and humility from how I address my business. But I'm also a wellness practitioner. I'm also hearing it from like, how do I address disease? How do I address disease in my own body? And how do I address disease or symptoms or whatever my clients might be dealing with? And I think your messaging resonates with both. Right now, it's resonating with me really powerfully in both paths. Thank you for that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, one of your key takeaways is something you call the power of the pause. When things are happening and they're starting to feel really big and overwhelming and maybe even exciting. But this feels so relevant to how most of us operate. We're kind of in reaction mode, right? We're in survival. We're just trying to get through. So things are getting really big and we're like, I got to get through it. I got to push through it. So can you talk to us a little bit about this pause that we should try to incorporate?
Yeah, it's what we do during the pause that matters. Amygdala hijack, the part of our brain that runs us, before we run it, and create wreckage. So there's really no pause. There's a slight pause and a moment where everything just goes wild. Or there's the awareness, consciousness, humility piece of the pause, that you do that work during the pause so that you're ready to approach the issue. There's the part of the pause where you look really deeply and you actively re-record some of these messages that are going through your head that are inspired by all sorts of life experience in order to be ready, to create readiness for the experiment. Think of it like a lab. You don't do experiments in a dirty lab. You have to clean the lab before you do the experiment. You have to remove foreign objects. You have to make sure people are wearing lab coats. You need to set things up so it's a closed environment so that people aren't going to interfere with the experiment. You have to set up legal protections, and there's all sorts of prep. And the pause can be quick or it can be long, depending on what is needed. But what really is needed is that preparation space so that when you come into the maybe this is true, maybe this is not true, what's possible, that you don't come in it from a cluttered place. You come in it from a place of receptivity and the willingness to iterate, and iteration simply being go where the path leads as you ask the questions. We don't have a research answer. We have a research question. And that research question, as we continue to walk the path, it answers itself. But it's a scary thing to do. I call it the hallway. It's a scary thing to do, to stand in that hallway during the pause and go, there's lights under all of these doors. And I don't know which one to walk through. And I'm scared and all of that. The pause is about developing bravery. Bravery to address that problem, to be open to the answer, to set the lab, to set the internal conditions, and be ready to take right action versus any action.
I love this analogy because I'm hearing you, and through my lens of neuroscience and ancient wisdom, I can connect so deeply because you're talking about during this pause, literally in my language, resetting your nervous system, becoming embodied. So you're in the creating that, how you're saying about the lab, like creating that right playing field. So you have the bandwidth and the capacity to have that creativity and problem solving hat on. And we can't do that if we're in ego, if we're in fight or flight, right? If we're in fear. And so I loved how you're walking, like I felt like I was walking through a journey, how you were talking about the pause and the hallway and which road do I go down. And it was just really accessible to understand. And so what I'm curious about, and I run into this a lot with high achieving execs, and it sounds like that's your wheelhouse right there. If they're not connected to their inner wisdom, that sentence or phrase doesn't even make sense to them because they're so looking forward, visionary, accomplishing those tasks. How do you introduce them to this pause, to this power of the pause, in a way that they'll connect to it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's about preparing the lab and experimentation. It's about understanding that you're not going to hire a bunch of people who have no experience in innovation or experimentation to work your lab. So why are you going to walk into a room of people who have dirty labs to clean your lab? So the concept is we want to surround ourselves, and executive loneliness is a real problem. 72% of executives are incredibly lonely, and executive loneliness has a direct correlation with low levels of innovation in an organization. So one, that statistic is really powerful because it's not the woo-woo answer. It's the fact of the matter is that when you do not experiment and experiment with some sort of structure, framework, method, and a clean lab, you create change fatigue within your organization, or what I like to call change chaos. And to me, change chaos is like, and you've heard the euphemism about throwing spaghetti at the wall to try things out. Well, change chaos is like having the boiling pot and then sticking your hand in the boiling pot to grab the spaghetti and flinging it at the wall, costing your company money, fatiguing your employees, causing turnover, ticking off your customers. All sorts of things happen when you do that. So to those listening who are executives and who are in that space, to not have that clean lab is a really costly thing. And the sad thing is a lot of organizations don't.
Interesting. I love how you get to the heart of the problem.
Exactly. So if I'm hearing it correctly, what happens in the pause is the preparation for the transformation, cleaning the lab, right? Laying out all the parts that we need to execute the project efficiently, correct?
Yeah. And sometimes what will happen, and this is a downward spiral behavior, is that we'll get stuck in that space of isolation. We'll get stuck and say, okay, I've normalized. It's nice. It's comfortable here. I think I'll just stay and solve this myself. Or I think I'll just stay and I'll do this myself. And that is the isolation piece that limits the data that you have to actually experiment with towards the solution. And I like to say, instead of deal with the problem, I like to say experiment towards the solution, because the road will be revealed if you just take a step. Especially visionary CEOs, owners, founders love to do is they need to stay in action, right? So that pause, that might just be a beat. And that's fine. I'm not talking about retreat, you got to go to Bali and, come to center, no, there's no time for all that. But what there is time for is a quick process that says, this is the issue. This is the environment around the issue. I am neither too good to nor not good enough to face this head on, and I am ready to experiment. It can be as simple as declaring your openness to clean your lab. And when you do that, you carry a completely different energy into it, because then you can go into that boardroom, you can go into that war room, and you can say, we've got this. We've got this. And maybe this is true, because this is hitting the fan, and this is hitting the fan, and this is in the media, and blah, 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 blah. But consider, maybe this is not true, because here are the assets you have, and here are the assets this person has, and this partner has, and this opportunity, and that. So maybe everyone get together and let's whiteboard out these possibilities. Okay, now let's rank order these possibilities. So when you start rank ordering that and you have a lens like revenue or reputation or wherever the problem went, that top one is going to drift to the top and you're going to go to that one. And then you walk forward with that one versus saying, okay, now let's try it all. Throwing the organization into change chaos.
And to simplify all that, the whiteboarding requires one to be aware enough and have enough humility and consciousness to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Otherwise, you come into the room in first stage down spiral behavior, which is denial, disavowal, and ego. You walk in with the attorney language, deny, 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 disavow, it's not happening, or ego, we're too good for this, let's pump up our culture and rah-rah it, or not good enough to, well, our company's stock prices are down anyway and we're on the skids, so of course this is happening. And when you bring that attitude into a room, it spreads.
Goodness, I think this brings me back to the two paths again. I see it in both business and in how we attack or how we deal with our healthcare. I think so many of us are just kind of constantly putting out fires, whatever they may be in our lives, right? And we're always dealing with these surface issues and we're never actually getting to the core of what's going on because we're like, I got to put out this fire and this fire and this fire, whether it be our healthcare or our business or something else in our life. So I love that you explained this experimentation strategy. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you. And I'm going to be thinking a lot about this and how we use this whiteboard, right, Mindy? How we use the whiteboard and come into the situation from a big picture view.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of experimentation is freeing because it takes the pressure off having to get it right. We're not looking for the perfect solution immediately. We're testing, we're exploring, we're gathering data.
I think Diane's takeaway was when she spoke about the ego and she spoke about solving the challenges. If they're at the bottom of that emotional guidance scale and there's ego or fear, they're not in the position to be creative and problem solve. So the beauty of her shifting them over to having that openness to experiment will be the home run for solving whatever said problem is. So it's so interesting how we can pull it back to physiology and neuroscience, but then in Diane's world, make them more money, right? Make the business succeed in a way that translates from that.
Absolutely. There can be and are metrics attached to these things. However, sometimes the outcome is so much greater than originally planned. It's such a gift, a pleasant surprise. I have a client right now who is deeply struggling, and he is in the process of paring back his organization. And in this process of paring back his organization, he just uncovered $300,000 in software costs that are on unused software that are unnecessary. He trimmed that off. He started looking at other places where he wouldn't have otherwise if things were clicking along just beautifully. But there are outcomes, and sometimes that outcome of that chaotic situation, of that situation that you feel like your world is falling apart, is really something so much bigger than you can ever imagine. But what I tell my clients is, this is my recipe of being willing to unlearn what you think you know. If you are willing to unlearn what you think you know, you can be open to inquiry. You can be open to experimentation and where the road leads. If not, well, this isn't true, because that will pop up, and that is pure ego reinserting itself into the process. So these spirals are not linear, and you can jump up and jump down and jump around and move up. But ultimately, the goal is crisis learning, and it's celebration of the win and realization of that outcome.
That's fantastic. The third big takeaway you have is the consciousness of the problem, right? So I think we're speaking to that a little bit, but can you talk into that a little bit more? And how do we create this map of the situation now that we're aware, and how do we become conscious of the problem?
Well, you want to strategically map the environment by, first of all, seeing who's involved in the environment. Environment is made up initially of its people. and the allies, the antis, the advocates, and the outright adversaries in what is going on. There is a great book by John Cotter, and it's called Our Iceberg is Melting, and it's about penguins. And a very junior penguin in this colony realizes one day that their iceberg is melting. And there's a big fissure in the iceberg. If their colony doesn't move, their colony will die. But he has no power. So the first thing he does is he looks across the colony and says, where's my ally? Where's the one person that if I talk to them, this is going to be a good space for me to, just work this out. And he goes, this other penguin named Sarah, and Sarah becomes his ally, but she also has the connections with the penguin board. And on this penguin board, there is this penguin, and he is called No-No. And No-No says no to everything. And he is an absolute adversary, and he pushes back on everything. And that penguin is something to be considered, because that no can be inside us too. We are in part of the environment too. So you want to look at the financial environment, the people environment, the process environment, like how do we do things, the systems, the policies, depending on what you're looking at. And from a healthcare standpoint, you're going to want to look at, what does my insurance cover? You're going to want to start asking those questions about what are the elements that encase this issue, and develop an environment that I can either make my ally, my anti, what is this? And once you really understand what is this, then you can question into it in different ways that you didn't see before. But if you're completely unaware that behind one of those closed doors, there's a saber-toothed tiger, and you haven't examined the environment or listened enough to hear the scratching and growling at the door, which in organizations we call listening posts, and ways that organizations listen. But if you're not listening to your employees, you're not listening to your customers, you're not listening, maybe just pausing for a bit and watching the media coverage, you're going to miss a big piece of the environment that when you come into the rest of this process, you're not going to see where the pushback is. So I think it's really important to understand the internal and external environment, the threats and the opportunities that you readily see, and then move that into the conversation.
And what's intriguing to me about this all is that the awareness, the consciousness, and the humility allow for us to explore what's true, what's not true, what's possible, what's not possible, and that you've referred to as a springboard to innovation, right? So how does distinguishing between what's true, not true, what's possible and not possible open up new possibilities?
Yeah, it does, because it increases that awareness that you can take to the next stage, you can take to the conversation, you can take to the experimentation. So where it ended up with me, of course, is I created my master's thesis. My master's thesis was transformed into the Creating Critical Opportunity workbook during the pandemic, because as we know, during the pandemic, everything hit the skids, and people were like, one day my business is fine and operating great, and the next day I'm told customers can't walk in my door because it's unsafe. What do I do? And I had created this method already, and I looked at it and I said, this can be used to save businesses right now. And I had one client who I presented it to tell me, you're crazy. You are absolutely crazy. Everybody is wrenching down right now. Everyone is self-protecting. Everyone's going down. Like nobody is making money right now. Everyone is suffering. You are heartless in thinking that and giving people hope that, they can innovate right now. What is going on? They're just trying to keep their in. And I said, okay, maybe that's true, because and I have a method that says otherwise. So I brought it to another client, a healthcare client. People were being told, no, you can't go anywhere in person. You have to do telehealth. You have to do this, that, the other. I said, okay, maybe that's true, because telehealth can expand. And how can we expand these telehealth services? But maybe this is not true, because we have a residential environment where we can create safety precautions. So we developed a coalition, a guiding coalition for safety standards. And the beautiful thing about that client is not only were their substance use disorder facilities not shut down and people sent home during the pandemic, they stayed open. No one got sick because it was a contained, closed environment. And as a result of that, they were able to open up clinical services and keep face-to-face therapy open as well. And that would not have been possible if they would have prescribed to what everybody else was saying. That was not the common narrative then, but it started to become the common narrative. And that's when I just put pen to paper and I got it out in April 2020. It hit Amazon.com, and it's the OG version is still there. And I'm thinking about a version 2.
I think it's amazing what you've done to help businesses, especially throughout COVID. The way I listened is that you were talking to a bunch of leaders that had stuck nervous systems. Okay. I always go back to the physiology. They didn't have the capacity to make creative ideas and to problem solve in a way that you could. So for folks that may tend to see things as binary, like as this and that, or black or white, or we only can do it this way, what you're describing is so much more expansive and it creates space for innovation. How do you help those people that are just stuck in that binary thinking to be open to these possibilities that you're presenting to them?
Confidence in outcome comes from evidence, and sometimes that evidence has to be micro evidence. So it's about creating an experiment that keeps them in a place where you're not going so out from their comfort zone that they go into the terror zone. So think of it like concentric circles. You have your comfort zone, which is your nice, warm, juicy middle. And then outside of that, you have your learning zone. And outside of that, your terror zone. What some people think of when they think about these changes is they think, I can't make that big change. That's really scary. And they drive straight into their terror zone. But what if the experiment was a single conversation? What if the experiment was asking one question? So wrenching that down into the comfort zone, you can then create an experiment in a lab that doesn't have a bunch of flammable fluid. You're not going to explode if you ask a question. There's no great grand impact. And the reason why we look at the environment is because you can identify, like the penguins, the Sarahs, you can identify those individuals. My professor was the first person I went to. And the uncomfortable was, I really don't know what to do. I'm in the hallway. I don't know what direction to go. I don't even see light under these doors. I see the destruction of my job because now I am not in an equity position in a software company. There goes that dream, rip. I'm being told I need to stop my dream school. I got accepted and I can't give up on that. And I'm ashamed to talk to anybody. If I would have carried that, which is a sign of ego, I wouldn't have done the micro experiment to ask the question to the professor. So I just implore that anyone who is scared to experiment, pick a micro experiment. You don't have to draw out the whole experiment. You don't have to know. Certainty is a myth. People who are selling certainty sell snake oil. So what you have to do is just walk, even if it's just a baby step, and choose that one around the possibility, and then allow it to be expansive. Allow the data to lead you. If you're spiritual, let spirit lead you, or universe, or what have you. But if you're not, let the data take you where you need to go. That's how I got my dissertation done at the end of the day. And I probably would have freaked out if I would have come at it from this position of, I have to know everything. And I was fortunate enough to have that incubator, to have that environment, to have that lab where I was taught otherwise.
Diane, there's something extraordinarily profound about your story. If I could just circle back for a minute as we start to wrap up. If things had gone differently for you, if you hadn't been laid off, if that crisis hadn't happened, this method wouldn't exist. I feel like that's a mic drop moment. CEOs you've helped, all those organizations you've transformed, the book, the master class, none of it would be here.
No, I definitely wouldn't be on this podcast. Who knows? Who really knows? And it's kind of fun after the other side. And that's why the top of the upward spiral is about celebration and crisis learning. Because after you're through it, after you're on the other side of it and you've realized the outcomes, it is quite fun to go back and go, if that wouldn't have happened, look at all the people I wouldn't have met. Look at all the impact I wouldn't have made. Look at all the abundance I wouldn't have and other people wouldn't have as well. And look at that positive ripple effect of this most life-disturbing thing. And I have many stories left like that across my life and not enough time to tell them. But it's fun. It's fun to go back and honor what I called crappertunity. Honor the crappertunity that happened for you and realize that it is happening for you and collect that evidence in the evidence bank. The rejections, like it doesn't have to be some grand life explosion. It doesn't have to be a layoff. It can be simple rejection. It can be every time you combated social anxiety and made it through alive. It can be a health issue. It can be anything that you come out on the other side of and go, wow, that was profound. And I really had some positive. Before all this happened, I saw The Secret for the first time. And after I saw The Secret, I went to the dining room table and I just said, I need some radical positive life change right now. And that was another one of my upside down moments that happened. So we all have these upside down moments, but we all have these upside down moments for sometimes turning greater pain into purpose.
That's powerful. For someone who's listening right now, who's in the middle of their own critical opportunity moment, what is the one thing you would tell them? Like, what's the one perspective or the one truth you'd say, this is the one thing you need to know if you're in the middle of it all?
If you're in the middle of it all, and things are swirling around you and it seems like there's no light under the door, you're in complete darkness, know that the real litmus test to the ability to innovate is, can you take one small step? Can you take one small step in the dark, hold on to the wall, align yourself with people, places, things that ground you, that bring you into yourself, and then be willing to unlearn what you think you know so you can be open to the next little baby thing. But know that your critical opportunity is right around the corner. Just got to be ready to take action, even the smallest one.
That gave me chills.
It's really beautiful, Diane. I love that you're essentially asking people to look at the world through curiosity and wonder, right? It's just really, really beautiful. And it translates into a successful life and career. And so for people who want to learn your method more deeply, whether it's leaders of organizations or maybe just individuals navigating their own challenges, how can they access your work? And tell us a little about your workbook and CEO Innovation Masterclass. That sounds absolutely amazing.
Excellent. So my workbook is on Amazon.com. It is called Creating Critical Opportunity. It is under the name that I was at the time, which is Diane Dye Hansen. So that is the one thing you can find on Amazon now. The masterclass teaches the pause behaviors, looking at the masks that we wear, looking at basic experimentation strategy, understanding how to observe and be that observer. And it's a no-cost class. So it's offered to all. There's an application on it, but till we open this thing up, as wide as we can to the world, it is open to everybody. So there's an application, but there's no pass-fail here. Just fill out the application, come into the class. We're going to be having it every Monday. And as many people as can be served by that, I want to serve. And to get to that masterclass application, you can go to peopleriskconsulting.com and there's a pop-up that'll happen. And you'll just click straight through and it'll take you right to the page for that. If for any reason the pop-up doesn't open up, there is a PRC training center. And it's right at the top of our training center on our website as well. And I really welcome people. I am an open connector to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can search me out as Dr. Diane Dye. Please connect with me, talk to me, and I just love to help.
That's such a generous offer. Thank you. And thank you for this incredibly insightful conversation. And of course, for sharing your own critical opportunity moment with such honesty, awareness, consciousness, and humility. I'm going to remember those 3 takeaways. They really hit me in a special place. The reminder that our setbacks can become our setups, that crisis can be the birthplace of innovation. This is truly transformational.
Thank you so much.
What strikes me is how practical it is. It's not just positive thinking. It's real methodology that creates concrete stages and tools that we can actually use. And you've proven it with over 500 CEOs. So with high stake challenges, it's really, really, really great.
And what I love is that you shared it in such a way that even if you're not a CEO, even if you're a mom with 6 kids, right, you could literally apply this critical thinking to their world, So thank you for this, because I really think anyone can go to your masterclass and get a lot of value.
I would absolutely love that. And to meet anyone who feels called to experiment and innovate in this way. It's truly a way to live life and a way to do business and show up in a way that is so expansive. And I would be thrilled if more people would adopt this methodology, use this methodology. I think it would create happier workplaces, happier homes, and just calmer days.
And we will have all of your links in our show notes. So to everyone listening, if you're in the middle of a challenging moment right now, whether it's in your business, your relationships, your health, your life, we hope this conversation has helped you see it through new eyes. Your crisis might just be your critical opportunity. So remember, pause, experiment, go deeper. The answers you're seeking are available when you create the space to see beyond the surface and explore what's actually true versus what you've been assuming. And as we always say here on SoulShift, the small shifts create big transformations. And sometimes the biggest shift is recognizing that what looks like an ending is actually a powerful beginning.
And if this episode resonated with you, grab her workbook and join Diane's masterclass. This work is real and it creates real measurable changes.
And if you're new here, welcome to SoulShift. Subscribe whenever you listen to your podcasts and join us every week to explore transformation, resilience, and that beautiful intersection of challenge and opportunity. Until next time, keep shifting your mind and your heart. Thanks for being here. Cheers.
Bye for now.
Thank you for sharing the sacred time today.
We hope something in this conversation touched your heart
and offered nourishment for your soul's journey.
Remember, transformation is most effortless when it happens one tender shift at a time.
Until next week, we invite you to carry one insight from today into your life.
Not as a task.
Think of it as a superpower to yourself.
If something resonated, we'd love to hear from you. If you're joining us on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment below.
Your words ripple outward, offering connection and comfort to others walking this path beside you.
If SoulShift feels like home, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review.
Your support will help us reach more hearts that need to hear they're not alone.
We're holding you in love, so know you're not alone. Your journey matters.
May your heart be filled,
And may your path be filled with grace.